This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Thank you, our panel of judges. My name is Nankonda Desire, and I'm the fourth negator. And we are dealing with a resolution that states political clash is a barrier to economic integration. So I have the following questions for the affirmers. Do policies come after a challenge, yes or no?
They are already there. Policies are already existent.
I asked yes or no.
No.
There is no answer in that. Is political stability of any use in acquiring economic integration if there is no economic stability? Yes or
yes,
no?
It is a lot of importance.
I
Yes.
said yes or no. Still, you're
Yes,
giving me no
yes,
answer
yes.
that I need. Another question. Do East African countries produce products of different quality? Yes or no?
Yes, they do.
Thank you. Do political clashes come as a result of economic differences? Yes or no?
No, they don't.
Okay. Did your third affirmer say that we mentioned political differences?
You talked about them. Don't argue about that.
Okay,
Talk
that's
about them.
enough for me. You can please take your seat. So, my dear judges, we come and explain to these affirmers that the main reason, the main barrier to economic integration is not political clashes, but rather economic differences. But they still fail to understand. So I come to ask them this question. So maybe probably they will come to an understanding of what we are trying to explain to them. I ask them, do policies come after a challenge, yes or no? So they are telling us about political clashes coming, they're telling us about political clashes. And political clashes, we look at them as policies different in ideologies, political ideologies and such. We try to explain to them that in any country, for political clashes to occur, it comes about when the different countries are trying to better their economy. That's why we are looking at countries such as Kenya refusing our goods, and because they are wanting quality goods, because that comes in conjunction with the question I asked them, that do different countries in East African community produce different quality of goods? He said clearly that yes. And this comes to prove that we have an economic difference in the East African community, and it means this is a trade barrier. This is a major trade barrier. I also asked them, do political clashes come as a result of economic differences? He clearly doesn't know. Maybe it's probably due to lack of research. Political clashes come as a result of economic barriers, because in any case, every government of any country wants to develop its economy. So we are looking specifically at East Africa. We are looking at Tanzania refusing to give trade working permits to Ugandans and Kenya simply because it wants to provide employment to its own people. So it is looking at its own economy, it's looking at the economic differences within itself, and it is creating a barrier between trade between Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, because if they're refusing to give us trade permits, how will that lead to economic integration? I also asked them, did the affirmer say that we mentioned political differences? He says yes, but did we really mention political differences? All along we have been mentioning about economic differences. They failed to listen to our argument. Then I also asked them, is political stability of any use in acquiring economic integration? If there is no economic stability, they say no. Our dear judges would like to tell you that economic differences are the major barrier to economic integration, and political clashes are just a minor issue. Thank you.
Indeed, he who loves last loves best. So now, do you know the difference between a and the?
Pardon?
Do you know the difference between a major problem and the major problem?
Yes, I do.
Okay, clearly you didn't know it. Secondly, do you agree that political clashes have existed in many of the economic integrations? Okay.
So
do these clashes hinder them from
differences.
achieving their goals?
Pardon?
Do such clashes hinder integrations from achieving their goals?
What causes them in the first place? Economic differences.
Are you aware that Rwanda applied in 1996 but was allowed to join the East African Community in 2007?
The fact that it is joined and
you're not aware. Okay.
failing.
Do you agree that an integration to flourish there must be efficient communication and cooperation?
How will it happen when
You
there are
don't
economic
agree. Okay.
barriers?
Do you believe that political clashes prevent effective communication?
How will it happen if there are economic barriers?
Okay, thank you. Do you also agree that political clashes hinder the movement of goods at borders?
No, it is because of economic differences between the nations.
At the borders, really? Okay. Do you agree that difference in currencies and taxation are all political differences and therefore causing political clash?
They are made by countries which want to develop their economy.
And that is political, right?
Economic difference.
You don't answer my question, okay? You can have your seat, please.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a very big conundrum because they have failed to interpret that a major problem is different from the major problem. They've given us problems. Yes, we admit economic differences are a big problem. But what we are here to say is that difference in political ideologies, which causes political clash, is also a major problem. And it is so grave to the extent, but they don't understand it. They've completely rebutted it, but they have not considered how grave it is. Ladies and gentlemen, to start off, I asked them the difference between a and the. The is a definite article. They should have known that the differences they've given us, economic differences, are not the only problem. They're not the only barrier. But we have other major problems, major barriers, and that is the political differences and clashes that we're talking about. So I wanted to ask them whether such clashes have actually prevented the integrations from getting their goals. Ladies and gentlemen, when the EAC was formed, it had targets of getting to the level of a common market. But because of political differences with countries like South Sudan, we have DRC, which is war-torn with M23, ADF rebels. How do you expect an integration to grow and achieve that level of a common market? East African communities just at the level of a customs union, but they did not know that. They just expected us to consider economic. Yet this is a very big problem. So I wanted to ask them about efficient communication. They didn't answer. But we need efficient communication and cooperation during trade. And when there are political clashes, leaders cannot sit down around a round table and negotiate prices. Leaders cannot sit down and talk about taxes because peace talks will not be handled. So communication is something they didn't look at, and that is a political clash. But they think it's still economic differences. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to ask them about difference in currencies and taxation. That's what they kept preaching. But ladies and gentlemen, this is all according to policies, international and national policies. So this causes political differences varying from country to country. That's why they have different currencies, and therefore taxation is different. That is not an economic difference. Next, our parameters are very, very considerate, and theirs are just too narrow. Because they believe that EAC is their major focal point, but for us, we are saying that this is a global problem. And that is why we need to widen the parameters to the world. With this, we rest our case.
Okay, debaters, thank you for a good round of debate. It pains me so much that there has to be one win of the debate. Here is where I saw my major point of clash in the debate. If there were ever an analogy, this debate would be akin to a debate of the chicken came before the egg or the egg came before the chicken. Now, both sides were arguing that do economic differences suffocate economic integration before political clashes come in? Team Affirmative came to that point and said, well, political clashes have suffocated, and then they stipulated specific evidence where that those political clashes have suffocated economic integration. Team Negative, on the other hand, came, although they didn't give you concretized cases, they gave you hypotheticals. So at the end of the day, it was like a swinging rope. Allow me to conclude that even at the end of the day, we do not know whether the chicken came before the egg or the egg came before the chicken. At least that's on my part. I found no conclusive evidence. Team Affirmative, here is what you would have done. You would have traced a causal link back to the history of economic integration. Think of it as indulging this august house in a history class and telling us, well, the economic integrations that exist many times did not happen because of the same common interests. You look at groups such as the Francophone countries that have a common currency that aligned just because they had a colonial master. Tell the antagonistic side and the August House that things in the East African community were actually good. We even had East Africa Development Bank under the colonial masters. However, after us gaining independence, after us going away from the administration of one person, politically, our minds went astray. We all went towards different alignments. You look at the Nyerere administration that proclaimed for socialism. You look at Obote lining with the capitalists. You look at Mzee Jomo Kenyatta who wanted a mixed economy. Draw a causal link and go back and draw us back to history. That is where you would have won that clash point. But it ended on a neutral perspective.
Thank you. Now, for both teams, first of all, I want to appreciate Team Affirmative on grounds of content. I felt from the first speech, when you started breaking down from the definitions to the different levels of integration, I, as a judge, and at the same time an economist, I was able to appreciate the fact that you understood what economic integration is all about. I credit you for that. Similarly, I want to appreciate the negatives, because I felt you equally brought good examples and cited cases that you felt were in favor of your argument. For example, you argued that a case in point, the differences in currency in East Africa, which in my books actually goes down as an economic difference, was a major barrier. Team Affirmative, I listened to your speech. I think the third negative, the third affirmer, tried to draw the connection of how the difference in currencies is more an issue of it being a political difference and not a difference, an economic difference. However, I felt you did not drive that point home. So I credited that point to Team Negative. They were able to point out how a difference in currencies is actually a major, more so if we're looking at a higher level of integration.
Guys, you're the best, yes? Now, to go on the issues why we allocated the marks at the end of the day, because at this point we don't know who has the day and who doesn't have the day. But for purposes of winning and losing, we have to have a side that we pick. On my judgment, I sided on how both teams presented their strategy. Now, Team Affirmative having the burden of proof with a prima facie case, proving that the political clash is the reason as to why we are having this major backlash in the economic integration. I'm drawing you back to the Universal Charter of 1977 and the East African Economic Integration of 1977 too, that happened in Arusha. I'm using East Africa because I feel persuaded the parameters of what? Negators. By then, when our great grandfathers, the great people of the nation, the nationals, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta, the likes of Mzee, the one of Tanzania, Nyerere, they came up and talked about how do we make the economic integration of East Africa come to one language and one accord. My question now goes to Team Affirmative. What happens? I beg to be corrected, I stand corrected, yes? What happens when now we don't have a political clash and still the question of economic integration is not achieved? Two, we have had instances where there is no completely any political clashes, just the way Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania and Burundi have been. But at the end of the day, we don't achieve a common goal by the name economic integration. Our forefathers using Kwame Nkrumah advocated for economic integration. I'm now coming back to your perimeters. When he was achieving the independence of Africa, and he said, that is in 1957, he talked of Africa will only come to an economic integration if we have one common unit that unites us. Last month, when the president of Kenya was addressing the Paris movement in Paris, France, he talked of why should we go and buy goods of Somali. As Africans, we are going to bargain of goods of Somali, we are going to bargain of goods of South Africa. And at the end of the day, the minimum exchange becomes $1. I find it attractive when Tim Negeta, the second speaker, came and mentioned about the dollar effect. Why are we buying goods with the dollar? Why can't we just have one common currency that cuts across and we have one common unit that unites us?
Okay. Like the previous judge mentioned, this was more of, did the hen exist before the egg or the egg existed before the hen? Because the affirmatives fronted evidence before the negatives, and they informed them that all these economic integration bodies have failed because of what? Because of political differences. And Team Affirmative came and said, no, actually, it was because of economic differences. Now, both of you failed greatly in trying to prove, you informing us that it is because of economic differences or it is because of political differences is not evidence enough to convince us that it is because of whatever you are trying to say. However, the only source of information that the only evidence that I could consider personally was the second speaker's evidence when she mentioned about East and Western Germany when they refused to enter EU, because one had a socialistic view of their political ideology and the other had a capitalistic one. That is the only one I considered as a barrier to economic integration due to political differences. Now, Team Affirmative, you have the burden of giving us a perimeter, and you gave your perimeter as the whole world. However, Team Negative came and told you, we are setting our perimeter as East Africa. You did not rebut that. However, throughout your entire discussion, you still mentioned Germany, you still mentioned USA, you still mentioned all those things. You implied your perimeter in your discussion as much as you did not rebut the perimeter. However, you are required to directly come, because you implying it is not expressing it to us. So personally, in my opinion, I faulted you at that. Second of all, fourth negator, Mexico does not exist in United States of America. Mexico is in the southern continent called South America. So that rebuttal, I did not consider it.
Thank you so much. To begin with, I want to begin appreciating both sides, both teams, for such a good debate you put up. Much appreciation to Affirmer 1, Affirmer 4, and Negator 3. You really understood your roles. Thank you so much. Keep it up. Ladies and gentlemen, today's resolution and today's debate, we had an issue to do with parameter clash, as my fellow co-previous judge just talked about it. This is just an issue of precaution and advice. Whenever there is an element of parameter clash, make sure that as you are coming as a speaker, for example, if Affirm 1 stated parameters, which parameters are refuted by Negator 1, it means that now as Affirmer 2, when you come back, reinstate the parameters that you have set. Likewise to negator too. When you come back, reinstate to the parameters that you have set. However, personally, I based my judgment on the ability of a team to play its role and to prove its case. As it is on record that it is always the burden of team affirmative to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt. And it is always the precaution on team negative that you have the burden of refutal, and not only the burden of refutal, but also the burden to give an alternative. Ladies and gentlemen, today's debate, we had a team affirmative that was talking about political clashes to be the major obstacle of economic integration. And we also had a negative side that was looking at economic difference to be the major obstacle of, economic integration. Personally, given by the qualitative points, I want to appreciate Afama 1 to the extent that by the time Afama 1 left the podium at the elapse of the 4th minute, he had established his case beyond reasonable doubt. Meaning, if the debate was to end on Afama 1 without giving any latitude from the negative side to make their case, Team Affirmative would automatically win. So, at the entire debate, as different speakers were coming up, it was at almost of a draw, but now I drew down now my line to the first speakers and to the fourth speakers. So, this was the issue. Team Negative said in their closing speech that actually, political clashes occur because countries are trying to better their economies. Whereas the fourth affirm also said, now do you expect leaders to sit down and negotiate on prices amidst the political clashes that are happening? It is on that I give Team Affirmative 63% and 60% to Team Negative. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a unanimous judgment. It is at a vote of 2 to 3. So 2 judges give Team Affirmative and 3 judges give Team Negative. So it is on those grounds that we as the panel of jury with enough training and expertise declare that Team Negative takes it. Thank you.